On the DNA are written all the instructions, the chemical, biochemical instructions that tell our bodies how to work, how to digest our food, how to repair themselves, how to grow in your mother's womb, from a single cell in your mother's womb to billions of cells in our bodies. All organised in the right fashion, with eyes in the right spot and everything. Some way or other, it's not much is understood about how this happens, some way or other, all that stuff happens in your mother's womb to produce a human body with all the features in the right spot and everything. And it all works together. And that's all written on the DNA, how to do all that. And there's a huge job in front of scientists to work out how it works. But some of the more simple organisms, quite a bit's known. But humans, way, way, way down the track to understand much of it at all. But the instructions are written on the DNA. So let's think about the simplest living thing. The simplest living thing, a microbe, a bacterium, how much information is in the DNA? Well, these have been decoded. One of the wonderful features and achievements of modern science is to decode the human DNA and the animal DNA and the microbe DNA and everything. We're talking about a book the size of an Encyclopedia Britannica volume, about 600 or 700 pages of A4 type size fine print. That's how much information is on the simplest bacterium that can reproduce itself. In fact, it's a parasite, so it actually can't live in the wild, so to speak. If you get something like E. coli, you're talking about more like 6 or 7 books of information. They live in our gut. So if you're going to get the first cell to make itself from some primordial soup, you've got to invent a book of information, instructions. How does that happen from chemistry? It can't. And I debate this at any university anywhere in the world with anybody. You cannot get a book of instructions from chemistry, which they have to get. It can't happen. In fact, the number of the evolutionists today are saying, origin of life, that's got nothing to do with evolution. We just put that aside now because it's too hard. The life can't make itself. And the more you discover about it, the more impossible the problem becomes. But anyway, let's just humour them by assuming that life did make itself. What about the rest of the story is that single cell changed into all the living things on Earth, including mango trees and you and me. Everything, just from a single cell, just by evolution. So if you're going to make a horse from a microbe, you've got to add stacks of books of information to make things like muscle and nerve and bone and all the things that horses have that microbes don't have. And if you're going to make a building, you need specifications, don't you? You need a car, you need specifications. You can't just throw it up. And that's what we're talking about here. How much information on the human DNA? We're talking about 1,000 books of information on our human DNA. We're a small library, the size of Encyclopedia Britannica. If you talk about paperback books, you're talking about 6,000 books. And it's a long way from being understood what it all means. In fact, one of the nonsense things that came from evolution was the idea that 98% of the human DNA was junk. Why did they decide that? Because evolution demanded it. They couldn't, even with their best possible assumptions, they couldn't account for more than a tiny percent of the human DNA by their process of evolution. So they decided 98% it was junk. No. That impeded the discovery of what that DNA did for 20 years. But finally it's unravelling and no, it's not junk, it does stuff. Surprise, surprise. Important stuff, I might add. Like putting you together in your mother's womb, the sequence of events that determines that one cell becomes all the other cells that all do the different things. Very naive. But very counterproductive thinking, this evolutionary thinking. It's very unreasonable and anti-scientific, the whole idea, and it impedes the development of modern science.